Hi, HRN listeners. We're celebrating our 15th anniversary, and we have a really fun campaign and an ask for you. This 15th anniversary tour is aiming to bring you closer to unique food and music experiences in some of the most exciting cities in America. All the while, we're raising funds to support our work empowering the next generation of food system storytellers through our fellowship programs. Here's how it works. Donate to HRN and be entered into a raffle in the city of your choice to win a dinner for two at a noteworthy restaurant and tickets for two to a concert at a prominent local venue. We have incredible partners in New York, Los Angeles, Philadelphia, Nashville, Las Vegas, Charleston, Asheville, and Ardmore, Pennsylvania, who have donated a meal for two and two tickets to a concert of the winner's choice. And all donations help fund our fellowship programs, where we're helping to build essential workforce readiness skills and food system storytelling skills. Check out heritageradionetwork.org/15 to donate and enter to win today. That's heritageradionetwork.org/15. Thank you.
This episode is brought to you by Visit Ithaca. Ithaca, New York boasts an authentic craft beverage experience, tasty farm-to-table culinary adventures, and scenic outdoor recreation among 150 waterfalls. Plan your trip today with help from visitithaca.com.
Hi, this is Lisa Held, host of The Farm Report on Heritage Radio Network. Each week, I record my show because I'm excited to bring you, our listeners, the most important stories about how your food is produced. At this critical moment in time, stories about how and what we eat are more important than ever. I am so honored to be a part of the HRN community of hosts telling those stories. Whether that means hearing from farmers about using soil health to sequester carbon, giving marginalized groups a voice in the industry, or just bringing people together over a good meal. This year, HRN is celebrating its 10th anniversary, and we need your support to keep food radio going strong for the next decade. Join the HRN community today by becoming a member. Go to heritageradionetwork.org/donate right now. You can even show some love for my show by selecting The Farm Report in the designation drop-down menu. Thanks for listening to HRN. Hello, this is Lisa Held coming to you live from Roberta's in Bushwick, Brooklyn, and you're listening to The Farm Report, a Heritage Radio Network show about the people, processes, and policies that shape how food is produced today. So today I'm talking to Meriwether Hardy, the Chief of Staff for Biological Capital, where her work focuses on developing new models for regenerative agriculture, renewable energy, and climate-positive land use. Meriwether, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks, Lisa. I'm really excited to be here today with you.
And you're based in Colorado, is that right?
I'm based in Colorado, so I'm calling you from my home actually in Boulder. Our offices are in Denver, but we work all across the U.S., so I spend a lot of time between our offices and with my hands in soil with farmers.
Amazing. And so I want to talk to you a lot about that work that you do. Before we get into that, I'd love to get a little background on how you got into this work. I saw a very cute picture of you as a little girl with your first beehive, I think it was. Is that right?
Yeah, that's true. So when I was 6 years old, I got my first official pet, and it was a very big deal because I had to take care of it all by myself. And it was a beehive because my father, for my whole childhood into my adulthood, was a commercial beekeeper. And so that was an important part of my kind of growing up and learning about agriculture and where our food comes from. And bees to this day fascinate me, and they are incredible creatures and have taught me so much about the world that we live in, and they are an indicator of the health of our ecosystem. And I could go on and on about bees, but yes, that was my first official pet when I was a little girl. And so growing up in Vermont, I grew up on a farm,
right,
and I saw how hard my family and those around me worked, and all my first jobs were in agriculture. And I'm happiest when I'm outside and with my hands in soil, but also at a very young age, I saw how broken our system is. And if my family and those around me can work so hard in agriculture but still struggle to make a living, I knew that something was wrong, and I wanted to, in my career, go out and work on tools and ways that we can help change the system and change the different economic models of how we grow food and how we value food and how we access food. And so that kind of started me on a journey of working in different places in the food system, which brought me here today to Biological Capital.
Right. And what are some of the other places in the food system that you worked before getting to Biological Capital?
So I've worked on many different farms and for different food companies, but one of my past jobs that I'm most proud of and that I learned so much from is that I worked for the Rainforest Alliance, which is a global certification organization that works with small-scale farmers all around the world. And with that organization, I traveled all around the world working with farmers on challenges to certification and working on grassroots solutions. For example, right now, there is a huge disease sweeping coffee plants all across the globe, particularly in Central America. It's called La Roya. And if farmers sprayed the kind of easiest to access pesticide for that rust, coffee rust,
right,
they would lose their certification. So a lot of what I was doing was working on how and where were farmers succeeding and finding solutions that allowed them to keep the certification and do a more natural form of pest management, and trying to then spread that through storytelling and workshops and through information sharing. And Rainforest Alliance does incredible work. They're the green frog with a seal on it that you see on coffee and chocolate and flowers and many other different food products.
right.
And it was, for me, a really important part of my own education, because their philosophy is we can't ask farmers to take care of their land or expect them to take care of their land or to not cut down trees or other forms of gaining short-term capital if they can't put food on their table. So how can we help farmers be better business people so that they can help think about longer term the health of their land and really work to pass it down to future generations?
Right. And that's, I mean, I might have to have a whole other conversation with you sometime about Rainforest Alliance, because it's funny. I've seen that seal and I don't know a lot about it. And it does seem to be a little less well known compared to, say, organic or even fair trade. And it sounds like some really incredible work they're doing. So another time we'll get into that.
Time, yes.
But I want to talk to you more about what you're doing now. So Biological Capital, what does the company do? Can you give us a little bit of an overview?
Yes. So we are a land use and land investment company, and that means that we design and implement regenerative versus extractive land use models for how we grow our food, how we get our energy, how we build human habitat, and how we protect land. And if you look back at our industrial evolution, it was really focused on extractive land use models. So build as quick as you can and as cheap as you can. And in agriculture, that was, of course, monoculture.
Mm-hmm.
So specialize in one crop, grow as much of that crop as possible year after year. And our culture is still pretty addicted to these extractive models. Yet, as we demand greater yields for the land without replenishing the nutrients we extract, we're, of course, now seeing the impact of these actions. And so Biological Capital is really focused on putting more into the land than we take out and making a profit while doing so that the models that we're using are scalable and viable. And for me, for working in the nonprofit world for many years, I so dearly believe in the importance of the tools that the nonprofit world brings us, but I also grew pretty disheartened of just looking at what a food crisis we are in and how most of the world is not aware of it yet. And so I wanted to work from a different sector to see how could I scale faster and work with tools and really work on the economic model of, for me, my personal passion of regenerative agriculture. And so Biological Capital, we have some case study projects that we've chosen very carefully across the U.S. in areas where we saw great potential to create a holistic, fully integrated regenerative agriculture operation, and where we knew that we could work to prove the model of the kind of return on investment of regenerative agriculture. And what we are now moving from, kind of from our first couple years of founding to investing in those case study projects, we're now in this really exciting chapter where I am looking for land for us here in Colorado, our home base, to do a project that involves a much greater scale and involves many more farmers, and really looking at how do we now share the work that we've done in the learnings and really take it to an economy of scale. So for us, that's not a monoculture, not just scaling one farm, but doing a model that includes many different producers.
Okay. Can you give an example of one of those case studies that you worked on? Like, what does this kind of work actually look like at the farm level?
Yes. So in Vermont and in the Northeast, we've done a lot of different work with dairy farms. And in particular, we have a project called Filer Ridge Farm in Vermont, where we're working to help transition a conventional dairy farm into a fully diversified, integrated, and what we call unscaled agriculture operation. And at that project, where we've now been working for 5 or so years, we have pigs and chickens and cattle and turkeys and several different acres of vegetables, and we have renovated some of the old barns on the property and now have a commercial kitchen, a processing facility. We use a local mobile slaughter facility. We have a butcher on site. And so when you come there, you can buy groceries, or you can buy a value-added product in the market, or you can take a sandwich to go home with you, or you can sit down for a soup. And if we take one of our beef cows at that project and we sell it wholesale, we earn about 1/10 of the value than if we take that same cow and slaughter it on the farm, process it in our butchering facility, and then use every piece of meat from nose to tail to turn it into a number of value-added products, from bone broth and soup and sandwiches to raw cuts of meat that we sell in the deli case.
Mm-hmm.
We earn and generate 10 times the revenue. So in that case is an example of what we're trying to do, where we control the market, we control the prices. We're going direct to consumer, and that the ability to do that takes upfront capital, which many farmers, of course, do not have access to. So one of the goals of that project was to show that with that upfront capital, with that investment at the farm level, that farmer can then generate that increased return. And for us right now, we are still in the process of measuring how long does it take to therefore earn that return on investment. Another example from that project is that it, again, was a conventional dairy farm and grew, therefore, corn for many years in a row. And so the soil was quite compacted when we began working on the land. And with the holistic grazing plan that we've implemented, we are seeing really, really dramatic changes in the health of the soil and also the ability of the soil to retain water. And so, for example, we have a 50-acre study pasture where we're working closely with the University of Vermont to measure the changes in soil health. And we're seeing that over the last couple of years, that study pasture now holds 2 million more gallons of water. And so what that means is that soil and that land is more resilient. So when we go through times of drought, we have more reserve.
Right.
And so that's just another exciting kind of example from that project.
Right. Yeah. No, that's really interesting. And the economic model, I mean, you mentioned even with your work with Rainforest Alliance, it's sort of focusing on how this works economically for the farmer. And the fact that they're making 10 times the revenue is incredible. But obviously it does require so much upfront capital to get a project like this going. Where is that investment coming from? And, in terms of like creating a model like this, will other farmers have access to that kind of capital?
So we finance our projects like many other small startup businesses with private investors. Okay. And when we raise capital to work in a new landscape, we find the right fit investors for that landscape who fit with our goals. And we create a unique financial framework that fits the environmental, social, economic goals of all the parties. And we are not a registered investment right now. We hope to evolve our model to have a publicly traded fund or other investment vehicles that anyone can buy into in the future. And I think we're a couple years away from that still, because right now what we've really been focused on is those case study projects and proving the model. And now this next step is to do a much larger scale project that benefits a much larger group of farmers in more of a co-op style. And so our kind of, if you think of, for example, REIT or the real estate investment trust that were created in the 70s to create a real estate vehicle that anyone could invest into at any investment level, we want to pioneer a similar model for regenerative agriculture. And right now there are some really great groups alongside us working on different forms of how do we get more investment to farmers and to support regenerative agriculture. And the field right now is still a very new field. And so there's not a very established way of doing that. And so our approach to do that was to prove our model and then to kind of expand how that capital is accessed and how we raise funds and who contributes.
Right. I mean, it's such a fascinating realm. I think about this a lot. There's a lot of companies now doing impact investing and, sort of putting their money in this place where they want to help small farms or regenerate soil. But I also just see so much capital going into commodity farmland, and then especially like ag tech operations, like the huge hydroponic farms that can sort of pump out leafy greens in a controlled environment very quickly. Yeah. I guess I'm curious, like, can investment operations like biological capital make an impact compared to how much money is being invested in other parts of the food system?
So I think we have a long way to go, but yes, I very much believe so. And I think that part of that is that we can't be doing this one landscape at a time or one farmer at a time. And I think that that's where the working with many groups of farmers, and also for us, I believe that in the future, our most successful kind of metric is if other people are copying what we're doing. I don't want to be the only group doing these types of projects, but I want to continue to be able to share what we're learning, the mistakes we make, the successes, and share the different metrics that we're using, because I hope that, and I believe that we will get to a point where this case is so obvious, especially in terms of different environmental and social health of these different projects, that many different people are adapting, and that it's the new normal. But we have quite a bit of work to do to get there. And I think you're right of just thinking about, yes, there's a lot of funding right now going into large-scale conventional ag, but those projects are also, unfortunately, just for the people who are behind them, they're failing. The yields of those projects are declining. We're losing biodiversity. The food quality and nutrition is declining. There's a stat that there's as much iron in a single apple in our grandparents' era as there is in 3 apples today. And there's more and more good data on showing the link between regenerative ag and nutrition. And we're doing a lot of work along that to help show the business case. And so I think that there's a lot of studies and support that will continue to come out of looking at the definition of regenerative ag and how do we quantify that and reward and incentivize and support the farmer in order to transition.
Right. And so do you think it's, when you're making a case to investors for this kind of project, is it more about convincing them that actually maybe this makes more business sense in the long term, or is it you're just, going to investors who are looking to invest in projects that have a beneficial impact on the food system and the planet?
Right now, we work with both types of investors, but I would say that everyone we work with really adamantly believes in supporting a different model of food and agriculture. And so what you said on your first point of, yes, very much so, one of our talking points is that this type of farming is more resilient and actually more secure and less risky, and it takes investment in order to help the farmer get there, but that it's a very clear business case for us. But right now, with the size that we are at and the types of investors that we choose to work with, we are very much working with very progressive investors who really also believe at the bigger picture of the need for this work. And one thing that does excite me is that the market is still forming, but there are a lot of people that are really interested in supporting regenerative agriculture and that don't know how. And that's why I think also putting together these different vehicles and funds is going to be really important so that people can support and participate at different levels, especially as the business case becomes more and more clear.
Right. Okay. We have to take a quick break. When we come back, I want to talk a little bit more about the concept of scale, and then
Great.
also get into what you'll be talking about at Slow Food Nations this month.
Wonderful.
We'll be right back.
This episode is brought to you by Visit Ithaca. Located in New York's Finger Lakes region, Ithaca boasts an authentic craft beverage experience, tasty farm-to-table culinary adventures, and scenic outdoor recreation. As the saying goes, Ithaca is gorgeous. The city is home to 150 waterfalls and gorges sprinkled through its downtown and sloping hillsides. State parks and acres of natural lands offer outdoor recreation for every level of enthusiast. Come stroll among the cool ravines, scenic hiking trails, and natural vistas. Ithaca is home to Ivy League Cornell University and Ithaca College, resulting in an influx of new cultures, new tastes, and new energy every year. There's so much to explore, from art galleries and museums to unique attractions like the Cornell Lab of Ornithology. Ithaca sits at the heart of a blossoming heritage and craft cider industry. Some of these delicious ciders can be bought in market, but many of the most unique varieties can only be experienced with a visit to Ithaca and this great cider region. Go to visitithaca.com to get inspired and plan your trip today.
All right, we're back. You're listening to the Farm Report on Heritage Radio. This is Lisa Held, and I'm here with Meriwether Hardy from Biological Capital. So before the break, you said the word scale a few times. And I think, when we talk about food, we hear constantly, and business in general, we hear constantly about scaling up in terms of making a business economically viable and also, in terms of quote unquote feeding the world. It's interesting, Meriwether, because I heard you say that you're trying to scale your model, but then I also heard you say that when you were talking about the Philo Ridge project, that it's an unscaled project. And I've heard you talk about unscaling the food system. So can you just unpack a little bit how you're thinking about scale?
Yeah, that's a great question, Lisa. And I think I do use scale in a number of different ways because it's a really important part of our work. And when I look at our current agriculture, it's really a commodity game. And large-scale commodity farmers are really commodity traders and really forced into market prices and don't have control of the price that they're getting. And so our research shows, and our belief is, that small-scale and medium producers have the greatest likelihood of being sustainable, both environmentally and socially. And it's for a number of reasons, including that many small-scale operations still farm the way they did 100 years ago. They have less resources. They have to be more efficient with crop planting and less machinery, less use of oil, more plant and crop diversity. And it's also, and this is, I think, a really key point, it's easier for small-scale farmers to innovate. Large-scale farmers are locked into their farming systems by debt and the commodity market. And also that small and mid-sized operations tend to be more regional. So they negotiate prices with their customers in restaurants, retail, or institutions, where large farms are typically less diverse, operate globally, make millions selling to processors or brokers or distributors. And so I also don't want to romanticize that small-scale farming is easier because it's harder to get a loan. It's hard to scale your operation from small to medium.
Right.
It's really hard, especially today, to pass it down to future generations or to have more than one family member perhaps making a full-time living on that operation. So it's also really challenging. And so for us, the idea of scale is to work with many small-scale producers. And an example that I like to give is that if you live in Silicon Valley and you have an idea for an app, there are a number of different places that you can go to give a pitch. And depending on your pitch, those different places will help you put together a more formal deck and help you find investment. And there's all these incubators and accelerators that when you have a good idea, there's a lot of support.
Okay.
We don't have anything like that for agriculture. And the ability to create a incubator or accelerator for regenerative agriculture where you're working in a community of people and either you're have a new idea for a value-added crop, but you don't have the technical skills or the investment or the marketing communication skills, that you're working with this network of people to support you to make that idea into reality, for me is a really compelling part of thinking about why to bring together many small producers. Or, for example, if you're living in a community where there is that network, you can grow the raw product, but then sell it directly to someone else in the community who perhaps has the expertise or the interest to take that product further up the value chain.
Right.
So scale is about, for me, the importance of supporting healthy practices and a diversity of different producers in order to get to that larger scale.
Got it. And I mean, it sounds like, when you talk about the efficiencies of small and medium-sized farms and how they can innovate, it sounds like you're saying at the farm level that scale is not necessary to make an operation economically viable, in your opinion.
Yes, I think that increasing just the growing of one crop is not the type of scale that we're talking about in order to increase the economic viability of that production. To me, we have a diagram that we've created that we use in a lot of our communications that we call the food pyramid, where there's 3 different levels, 3 different tiers. At the very bottom level is if you're growing a raw commodity crop in a perfect year where there's great weather, the markets are stable, you earn about a 4 to 6% return on that crop.
Okay.
Very hard to make a living on that, obviously. As you move further up the triangle, you go into more of the product aggregation and different kind of washing and packing, cold storage, sales, brokerage, distribution. You earn about a 10% return if you are working in that kind of section of the food pyramid.
Right.
As you go to the top of the food pyramid with the value-added products, and it's really where the different groups who directly touch the consumer, so whether it's a market or a restaurant, you earn about a 20 to 25% return. And so what our projects try to do is to vertically integrate and to bring all those different levels of the pyramid onto one landscape, so that either a single farmer is growing the product and then taking it up the value chain and selling directly to consumers, or a restaurant, or that there are multiple people, multiple stakeholders involved in that same project where one person is growing it, but another person is putting it into a value-added product or creating a restaurant.
Right. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Capture all that value.
Yeah, they're just essentially allowing the farmer to capture way more of the food dollar.
And then again, it goes back to the question of, or the issue of, it takes investment in order to have the infrastructure to vertically integrate and allow all those kind of, to cut out the different middlemen, middle women, and do that all in one landscape.
Yeah. And how did you find, like, the projects that you've worked on so far? Did people come to you, or did you identify projects that would work really well to transition like this? Like, you mentioned the dairy farm in Vermont, and I know you've done some work in Hawaii. Like, how did you decide, like, okay, this is a place where this would work really well as a case study?
We had to initially be careful about where we put our initial investment and time and energy and passion, and we chose ecosystems that we knew could produce food and that had clear markets, but that for different reasons also had major challenges. So dairy farming, particularly in the Northeast, is really struggling. That was a very both compelling case for us, but also one that felt really important to be part of and be helping find solutions to. And also, for example, in Vermont, you have a very clear market of people really support local food. And you also have the nearby markets of Boston and New York, which help drive the agriculture community of the Northeast. In Hawaii, on the other end of the spectrum, you have this perfect growing climate that you can grow all year round. And of course, that comes with a number of pests. But there's all these other challenges where Hawaii right now imports over 85% of their food. So if they were cut off from the mainland for over 10 days, they would start to really struggle with food security. And so, again, it felt like a really compelling case for us to work on solving. And then given a number of different challenges, yet also opportunities of the perfect growing climate, felt like another good place for us to put our initial efforts, and important also biological ecosystem for us to be part of, where Hawaii of course, has this unique climate that it's a semi-tropical climate in the U.S.
Yeah.
And so we have, and then we've done work in other places across the U.S., but those have been two of our initial focus areas. And I'm now turning our attention to trying to do some more work in Colorado, but it's more of a challenge because we have a short growing season. We have hail on each side of the growing season. We just got hail last week. It was July 4th. And we're working on a rooftop farm project here in Denver right now, and the hail ruined a lot of the crops that we have.
Wow.
And so it's a challenging environmental place to work, and water is also an issue. But to me, it's also it's very important for us to be working in our home state and our backyard. And now that we've kind of built up more capacity and some more years of experience, I feel ready to work and jump into the community here.
Right. Absolutely. And so also coming up in your home state is Slow Food Nations, coming up in Denver, July 19th to 21st. And Heritage Radio is going to be there. Not me, unfortunately, but other people from the network. And so I wanted to talk to you a little bit about that. I saw you're speaking at a summit called the Innovative Farmer. And interestingly enough, the other people involved in the summit, there are two other previous Farm Report guests who were actually on the show in the past year, Bob Quinn and Jack Algier. So it's just like, a little Farm Report party that you're going to be at. But yeah, so I wanted to ask you, so it's called the Innovative Farmer. What is that all about? What are the big things you're seeing in terms of farmer innovation that you plan on bringing to the conversation?
Yeah, so I'm super excited for this panel, and we had a great conversation prepping for it recently. And all of us feel really fascinated and excited about this kind of tension and opportunity between what we think of as traditional farming methods as well as innovation and where the future of farming is headed. And so the group of us are all really excited to talk about different lessons that we've learned, and both mistakes and failures and successes in terms of how we've tried something new and had it fail and then problem solved and done it differently and had it succeed, whether that is growing a certain type of crop, whether it's going back to some more ancient wisdom but with a tweak of how something is cultivated, whether it's exploring a new value-added product. I know Bob Quinn is excited to really talk about the different value-added products and how he's kind of gone along his learning journey in thinking about how does he succeed, which he of course has done as a farmer, and take things further up the value chain. So very similar to what we're talking about. So really, the group of us really talking about agriculture entrepreneurship and that tension, excitement, relationship between innovative technologies and also learning from the past and using nature as design inspiration and kind of how those worlds come together.
Yeah. Is there an example of an innovative technology in farming right now that you're excited about?
I'm very curious and interested to watch how, especially in small scale farming, how we bring more efficiency and diversity and into small scale farming. And for example, I was just reading an article about a very, very small, super energy efficient tractor that they're using in Switzerland. And that tractor allows you to be doing very diverse plantings next to each other versus where, of course, a lot of tractor use, you have to be focused on just one crop and the tools for that crop. And so I'm really interested how a tool like that, especially whether it's a hand tool or a push tractor or something that is using solar energy, of how that can help create efficiency for small-scale farmers and perhaps give them access to technology or tools that they haven't been able to afford in the past or just hasn't been able to make sense.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I know Jack has the tractor at Stone Barns that people get excited about, that it's like farmers can kind of build it themselves too. And so I'm sure there'll be plenty of tractor discussions. One other thing I wanted to ask you about is you brought up a few times the idea of regenerative agriculture. And I know that that's a word that Biological Capital uses a lot. And just in the past couple of weeks, I have been in many situations where the word regenerative is just being kind of thrown around so intensely in a way that I'm sort of like, what are we even talking about? And I guess I want to ask you, well, first of all, just what does regenerative agriculture mean to you? And then are we like in this place where we're sort of in danger of it losing its meaning?
Yes, we are very much so. And I do fear that similar to the term organic and the certifications around organic, that we're going to have a similar thing happen to regenerative. And for me, on a super simple level, regenerative is really important because we are no longer in a place where our food systems can be sustainable. We can no longer just expect to sustain how we currently grow food, sustain our current amount of topsoil, sustain our current amount of organic matter in our soils. We are obviously in a place where there is real urgency around us needing to build back up topsoil and build back up organic matter. And so for me, on a very basic level, regenerative is about putting more into the soil than we take out. I know that there is many different types of uses of the word, and at this point, even competing certifications. I do worry that at times using the word isolates the farmers who are doing really good work that are not doing something under the definition of regenerative. And so I do think we have to be careful about how we use the term or how we make sure that there is a stepladder approach or financing or technical assistance to those producers who want to come along in that process of how do we, at this point, restore our soils so that we have soil in the future to be able to grow food. And so I think it's a really interesting time right now with that word. And I think even what I've seen happen in the last year, and I think what we'll see in the next year is a continued evolution of how the word is used. But I hope that more of us using that word can get together to be on the same page about both defining it, but then using that stepladder approach of helping to include others in that definition who need support and help in order to get to that place of using those practices. Right.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's just crazy to me how quickly this happened. Like I feel like, it's the organic has kind of evolved and people are question often, sort of how strong, what the word it's used in a lot of different contexts now. That took it seems to me like a really long time. And regenerative, I feel like I just maybe heard it for the first time 2 years ago, and all of a sudden it's just kind of everywhere. It's like things just move faster now, I think, just with technology and, but yeah, I think just having people define it more and more, like you said, is definitely just kind of going to be important.
Yeah.
Hearing you describe in a really simple way what it means to you, it means that we have to rebuild the soil and the system, that we can't just sustain it. I think that on its own is really helpful,
Yes.
So we'll see what happens on that front going forward. Well, we have to wrap up. Thank you so much for coming on. If people want to hear more about Biological Capital and find out more about your work, where would they go?
Yes. So thank you. Great question. And our website is just www.biologicalcapital.com. And I also, people can be free to email me as well. My email is mhardie, HARDIE, @biologicalcapital.com. And I hope those listening who are able to come participate in the Slow Food Nations conference. It's going to be a really amazing collection of people and food and different cultures and great, important conversation about agriculture as well.
Great. Well, thank you so much for coming on. It was great talking to you.
Well, thank you, Lisa, and an honor to be on today with you all. Thank you.
Thank you all so much for listening to the Farm Report on Heritage Radio Network. If you enjoyed the conversation, please subscribe to the podcast, rate it, and share it. I'll see you next week.
Thanks for listening to Heritage Radio Network, food radio supported by you. For our freshest content and to hear about exclusive events, subscribe to our newsletter. Enter your email at the bottom of our website, heritageradionetwork.org. Connect with us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at heritage_radio. Heritage Radio Network is a nonprofit organization driving conversations to make the world a better, fairer, more delicious place. And we couldn't do it without support from listeners like you. Want to be a part of the food world's most innovative community? Rate the shows you like, tell your friends, and please join our community by becoming a member. Just click on the beating heart at the top right of our homepage. Thanks for listening.